Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the OK Grognard Show. It is Sunday, November 22nd, 2020, 10 a.m. Central, in beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Well, it's Sunday, and that means it's a rules retrospective day. Last couple of weeks, I think we've been going over regular hirelings last week, and we looked at the Sage in particular a couple of weeks ago. That was kind of out of the blue, because the Sage is actually part of Expert Hirelings, but it's such a large part of what we're looking at today that it just seemed like the Sage needed to be its own thing, right? Just to, because it was going to fill up a show. Got my big train shirt on today because Music in Widescreen happens at 6 p.m. Central on progrock.com tonight. So if you're not doing anything and you like progressive rock, every Sunday night from 6 to 9 Central, Music in Widescreen is a show out of Chicago. Mark and Raina Monforti do a wonderful job showcasing old and new prog. They get lots of interviews with musicians. You get a behind-the-scenes look at a lot of stuff. And it's a great show. I just enjoy it. I've been a prog rock fan as long as I've been a D&D fan since the early 70s. So Genesis being my first and favorite progressive rock band. But, you know, yes, Pink Floyd, Rush, all the more popular bands, as well as a lot of off the beaten track stuff like oh my god, how much should I go on and on and on? I should do this show, not their show. They can do their show. All right, so let's look at it. What do we got here? First edition Dungeon Master's Guide. I cleaned up that image. I used to have a little border around it. I got tired of looking at that border. It was a little stark. Not Tony. Just good old Stark. Let's jump right into Expert Hirelings. What is that? Page 29? 31? What is it? Let's see. 29. Expert Hirelings. Start right there. If henchmen are defined as the associates, companion, and loyal, to some degree, followers of a player character, hirelings are the servitors, mercenaries, and employees of such player characters, and they too can have some degree of loyalty, based on their accommodations, rate of remuneration, and treatment. Various hirelings of menial nature are assumed to come with the cost of maintaining a stronghold. Thus, cooks, lackeys, stable boys, sweepers, and various servants are no concern of the player character. Guards and special hirelings are, however, and such persons must be located and enlisted by the PC or his or her NPC henchman. So you can have somebody who's a loyal retainer, who's a henchman, be an agent for you, seeking out and hiring guards. Location of expert hirelings. Most expert hirelings can be found only in towns or cities, although some might be located in smaller communities, providing they are willing to pick up and relocate, of course. Employment is a matter of offer and acceptance, and each player character must do his or her own bargaining. The various types of hirelings listed below will generally be found in the appropriate section of the community: the Street of Smiths, Weapon Way, Armorer's Alley, etc., or at cheap inns in the case of mercenary soldiers. Monthly costs. The cost of each type of expert hireling is shown on the list. The amount is based on all the associated expenditures which go with the position, salary or wage, uniform or clothing, housing, food, and sundry equipment used routinely by the hireling. Exception. The cost does not include arms and armor of soldiers, and these items must be furnished to mercenaries over and above other costs. Certain other hirelings incur costs over and above the normal also, when they engage in their occupations. These are indicated on the table with an asterisk. Well, let's look back at some of this here. Right? This is the first 3 paragraphs. We got the overview. We understand how they stand out as different from henchmen and different from standard hirelings. These are specialists that come at a cost. They don't necessarily have to be loyal. They don't necessarily have to be tied to your worldview. They are people who know how to do a job and do it for money to make a living. That doesn't make them neutral or evil in any way. That doesn't necessarily mean, if the job they're doing isn't making poison, and even then, if you got somebody who is a professional maker of poisons, an alchemist who specializes in poison, you might just, it might be for the sake of ridding a town of vermin, rats, and disease carriers. And that's actually a good thing, right? Depends how much they charge, I suppose, and who they work for. But that aside, you definitely want to think of these as professionals who work for pay, contractors. They might have a long contract, they might have a short contract. You could hire on an armorer to work in your stronghold and be readily putting out regular sets of armor and repairing armor of other individuals who work for you as a full-time job. They may need multiple people working with them, apprentices, other people to run and go get water for them, do other things, maybe just as a way, extra pairs of hands, and you may have to pay for them too. But chances are the cost of the armor is going to be your major salaried position. Now, it may be that your character is doing such heinous things throughout the land, not in my campaign, because I don't do evil for player characters, but perhaps in your campaign, or the campaign you're running, or the campaign you're playing in, player characters can be incredibly nasty, in which case you might have some problems with some of your contracted employees. You might need to do morale checks for them. You might need to see if they understand that it's tough for you to find somebody to work as an armorer when your days might be numbered because everyone's out to get their master. So maybe they get while they're getting good and get the heck out of Dodge, or maybe they stick around, but they'll only do so for a higher wage. So it may be you could hire somebody initially at one wage and their wages change. It may be you do them favors. It may be you hire an armorer from one place and he's got family back at home. His wife and his kids are staying with his parents in another town, and you offer to move them here to join him. It's a twofold sort of process, right? Because you're looking to bind him to you, but you're also doing him a favor. Of course, he wants to spend his life when he's not working with his wife and his children rather than be off in a foreign land or distant town or city or location away from his family for long periods of time. So perhaps there's a way of changing the formula for the costs, finding a way of making an agreement with one of these contractors. Hey, if I bring your wife and kids here and bear that expense and open up more space for them here within the castle, room and board and all of that, what if we lower your wage a little bit to offset some of that cost? No, that might be agreeable. You'll have to do checks. I don't know, not morale checks necessarily, but reaction rolls to see how willing they are. Reaction rolls, of course, are going to be affected by how good you've been to them in the past, how closely aligned you are in general outlooks, how much work they expect to have. If they think they could spend the rest of their lives here making good money and maybe pick up some money on the side, then maybe that's all they'll ever want for the rest of their lives. They can be with their wife and raise their kids, or be with their husband and raise their kids. We love Kate from A Knight's Tale, one of the best armorers ever. Monthly costs. So we went through that. We went through finding them. Here's the thing. Let's spend a little time talking about this. Locating them in their appropriate section of the community in larger towns and cities. It's definitely something you need to, that players need to consider where to look for certain types of people. Now, it may well be that this type of game is not for everybody. Players may balk at spending a great deal of time doing all this running around and hiring and whatnot for a stronghold, especially if there's just one player at the table who has the stronghold and you've got 4 or 5 other people that are meeting each week. You can't have them sitting on their thumbs the whole time. So maybe there are ways of integrating some of these things into an ongoing game so that you can seamlessly find a way of instilling that this is something that has to happen within the players, but think of it mostly as off-screen. Oh, you guys are going back to town between adventures. You still need to hire an armorer. Well, you're there. We'll just say you head down to the district where you look for armorers. You find 2 or 3 candidates. You quickly interview each of them. You narrow it down to 2. Here's their story. This one's a younger, single, on his own sort of individual. This one's older, has a husband and children who are living with him in town here and would not want to relocate without bringing them along. This one will cost this much. She's better. She's a better armor, faster, works harder than this young one who just set up his business, was an apprentice for many years for a pretty good armorer, maybe her, and now is off on his own. These are your options. This costs this much. This costs this much. Which way do you want to go? Think about it. We'll get back to it, we'll say. And that way you're moving the game along. You've covered all your bases with what's expected for something like this. You don't have to role play each and every sentence of every conversation they have while narrowing down the field, or even when choosing one or the other of these two. If they want to get into it even more, throw a name on them. And that's something I try to do when somebody has expressed as a player a particular interest in an NPC, a hireling, a henchman, whatever, uh, until they want to dig deeper. I often don't even give them a name because it suggests they should spend more time on something that they may not want to in the first place, but they feel obligated because you've fleshed something out in a way that suggests they need to spend that time. So, it's like when you find a stray cat and you're looking for the owner, you don't name that cat. You hang on to that cat for a little while and try to find the owner and take care of that cat, but you don't get attached because when that owner comes and that cat has to go back to the family and their kids and everybody else, you don't want to have your heart broken, and you don't want to confuse the cat by calling it something else all the time, right? Not that it necessarily will listen. It is a cat after all. Not so true with armorers. They may well have a name, but you don't have to role play into it unless the group's really into that and wants to do it. Let them kind of be your guide. See how the players, and I mean in total, if one gets really into something like that and nobody else is interested in it, don't make everybody sit around while this one player is buying drinks and making small talk with a couple of armorers over the course of a day. Just let them know it takes them a whole day to spend that time and find out what everyone else is doing. Monthly costs. Well, we talked a little bit about that and how it can be adjusted. I wouldn't adjust stuff too far from this. There is potentially a certain balance to these tables of expert hirelings and what things cost. Occupation or profession. This is a monthly cost. $300 for an alchemist. Man, somebody's making that dragon's fire and just storing barrel after barrel under the city. Exciting. Armorers. We got asterisks here for materials that are ongoing costs. Engineer, architect, artillerist, sapper, they dig. Miner, they dig tunnels under walls and whatnot for you, or expand your dungeon. Jeweler, gem cutter, mercenaries. There's a whole list of different types of mercenaries, different types of troops, different types of weapons that they use. And we won't get specifically into each and every one. But here we go over here. We're looking at the Alchemist now. How are we doing on time? Around 19 minutes in. Do we want to get into this too far? We talked a little bit about the armor already. Alchemist. A professional handles the compounding of magical substances, and the advantages of employing an alchemist are detailed under the section Fabrication of Magic Items, potions. So there you go. You want to make a healing potion factory? You hire yourself a bunch of alchemists. Alchemists will only be found in cities unless you specifically locate one elsewhere. That is, unless the DM places one somewhere else within his setting. It would be unusual to find them outside of cities. Cities being large enough venues, communities, where all of the reagents and ingredients that they need for their work can be more readily found. And that's not even a sure thing. It will require an offer of 10 to 100 gold pieces, bonus money, plus a well-stocked laboratory, plus the assurance of not less than a full year of employment to attract one to service. So that's interesting. Let's talk a little bit about that. The guarantee of a year's worth of employment. That's a pretty important thing, that assurance. Because, especially if this is someone with a family that is moving them, that's no small task. It may well be that their spouse actually has a different profession and is plying that trade wherever you find this alchemist. It may also be that the older children of this family are apprenticed to some individual, and well, it may be that, let's say, they have a daughter who's apprenticed to the local blacksmith wherever you find this alchemist. If you uproot this family, we got one or two things that they have to think about. And one is leaving that apprenticeship. Can you find another? That's not easy. You're kind of screwing over the blacksmith who's invested this time in the apprenticeship. It's also possible that they'll have to leave the daughter behind in the apprenticeship program with the blacksmith. And what does that do to that relationship? Now the blacksmith has to find lodgings, raise them, feed them, along with teaching them. Used to be every morning the daughter of the alchemist would just go over to the blacksmith's place and start get their furnace started before the blacksmith even got up. Go gather buckets of water from the well. Get all the things ready to go so that when the blacksmith gets to his forge, he can get right to work and doesn't have to do a lot of the busy work and prep work that it takes to get things started. Now, if it's costing him to have this apprentice, maybe it's worth it to him. Maybe the alchemist is going to need to send some money back on a monthly or yearly basis. There are all sorts of ways that you can couch this relationship between the potential expert hireling and the player character if you want to get into some details. And you know, it doesn't hurt to sketch out some details to make it an interesting relationship from the standpoint of throwing some story elements in, because these are things that the player may light on or the group may light on, and you can go back and pick these up later when they come back through that town after having hired the alchemist and the daughter being left behind as the apprentice, and they get back and they're going through town and something has happened. The blacksmith shop has been burnt down. Well, where's my alchemist's daughter? I better look into this or I might lose an alchemist. So I've got a ready-made plot hook to create a potential adventure. They could very well ignore it. It's certainly the players through their characters' option to not bite on any given hook. So they may go off and just say, you know what? He'll find out when he finds out. The alchemist will find out when he finds out. We're gonna step aside, and maybe that creates some alignment issues. If you utilize alignments pretty heavily, we were playing in a game yesterday. Hobbsy was running a game, and one of the characters who's known for always having a war dog or a guard dog, and has lost a couple in battles along the way. They're more loyal than an NPC, but than a hireling or henchman, but not, and maybe even more resilient in some cases. But they don't level up. You can't outfit them. You can't use them for missile weapons and to watch your back with a spear. They have to get up into it, right? There was a point at which there was a creature in the water that we had to get across or past, and it had already taken out a couple of henchmen. And some of us were on one side and some of us were on the other. And this player, jokingly, I believe, Maltworm, you're not here today, are you? Jokingly said, well, what if I distract him by throwing my dog into the water? I was like, oh. Of course, he was joking. I don't think he would have ever done that. First of all, the dog cost him good gold. And we certainly don't want a situation where people online take that to heart and suddenly there's a crusade against everybody involved because of a humorous moment within a game. It's an absurd situation not to be taken seriously. And we have to be careful about that as we go. Hey, look at the time. We're getting there, aren't we? Well, I got to say, this has been interesting. We'll start up with the Armorer next time we get back into this Expert Hirelings thing. I think that'll be fun. There's a lot to unpack with each of these, and certainly it's a lot of fun riffing on how you can integrate these things into your game in a more meaningful and detailed way. So, educationally, review-wise, it's important to detail these things beyond just reading the pertinent sections, and anybody can do that, right? So, thank you very much. Everybody who's joined us today or follows the channel and chimes in on the stream chat whenever you're here so you can get on the list for the drawing. We did a drawing of for last week's already, and I sent a message to the person who was picked off the list. Hopefully they'll get back to me sooner rather than later, and we'll figure out if they want to accept a pair of skill dice and a Lake Geneva Games D20 or D10, D6. Get it together. That were all put on the Gary Gygax Memorial Stone down by the Riviera Fountain. Good times. Hey, Expert Hirelings. Like I say, we'll get back to more of that later. Tomorrow, we'll do the weekly news and announcements at 10 a.m. 10 a.m. today and every day. Cartography and world building on Tuesday. Campaign discussion on Wednesday. GMing tips on Thursday. Building adventures on Friday. GM reviews on Saturday. And a rules retrospective. Back round the horn to that next Sunday. We'll probably continue with this Expert Hirelings thing, unless something comes up and we want to take a minute off of that and get back to it later. What else? Well, hey, if you're catching up with this on YouTube, thank you very much. Please do subscribe to the channel. Give us a thumbs up on any videos you watch that you enjoy. Feel free to make a comment. If you have any constructive criticism or just want to give us a pat on the back, a little attaboy, it all helps keep the show going and making it better. This has been the OK Grognard Show from beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Thank you very, very much, and bye-bye.